I am Juan Villoro. I'm a Mexican journalist and writer. I write children's books, I write for the stage, and I write for the press as well. Recently, my first short story collection was published in the United States. It's called The Guilty, and I am taking part here in this venue with other Mexican writers trying to address some of the main issues of our troublesome country. Mexico is an extraordinary creative country. We have a wealth of literature, and our food, our paintings, our films are very well known in the world. But at the same time, it's a difficult country to live in, and we have very, very troublesome political issues. So I think it's only natural to speak about violence, because we have this so-called war on drugs that has taken more than 130,000 lives. So it's a very difficult moment for Mexican politics and for Mexican society. We live in an unfair country next to the United States, which is the biggest consumer of drugs in the world. So the situation is tough, it's difficult, but I think that many times difficult situations foster an extraordinary creativity in the arts. I think that's the case of Mexican literature nowadays. There are wonderful journalists and writers in Mexico. For example, Elena Poniatowska, who recently won the Cervantes Prize. She has written about Frida Kahlo, the great Mexican painter, about Tina Modotti, a photographer and political militant who went to live in Mexico, about the student movement of '68. So Elena Poniatowska would be a very interesting pick. Her works are in English, and I think that would be very, very interesting for the Scottish reader. Well, I really wanted to come to Scotland. I mean, I know the mythology and something about the culture of Scotland. I've read David Hume and Robert Louis Stevenson, and current writers as Robin Robertson, for example, the great Scottish poet. And of course, in Mexico, we are aware of Sean Connery and his passion for Scotland and so on. So I really wanted to come here and to taste some of the Scottish whiskey.
My name is Sergio González Rodríguez. I'm from Mexico, and I'm a journalist and writer, Mexican journalist and writer. I write about violence against women. I write about the situation, political situation in Mexico. But I think Mexico is a great country. Now, unfortunately, is in a very bad moment. But I think culture and literature are some ways to improve our situation, our bad situation in Mexico. As a writer, I think the most important in this moment in general, not only for or in my country, but in general, is the respect to another people. It's very important. I think, for example, the Mexican culture is very important, but the Mexican culture is more than pyramids, Mexican painting. Frida Kahlo, the great painter, Mexican painter. I think the country now is having diversity of expressions of art, literature, film, for example, photograph, whatever. It's an explosion of new talent of young people, Mexican young people. I think Scotland is a great country. For example, I remember that there was a great writer, Scottish writer named Wilfrid Edward, that died in Mexico City a long time ago. But he is a great writer. I recommended you to recover this old Scottish writer, and now it's very important to reading anew. I think it's very necessary to know better, for example, for the Mexican, the Scottish culture, and the same for the Scottish in relation to Mexico. I think we need to know better. It's very important. There are a lot of values people in both countries, but we have to read, we have to inform, we have to know better. I think it's necessary to have some ideas immediately. The society in Mexico, for example, is very complex. We have to let behind the ideas about violence and barbarian times. Mexico is much than that situation. We have to have more comprehension about the truth of the culture and country in Mexico. Yeah, I think it's the same for the Scotland.
Basically, we come here every year. It's related to the festival, but also to the book festival. And we enjoy it a lot. And today there is this Mexican event, and they brought 3 authors. And we know them, the 3 of them. So it was a pleasure to know them, and to have a copy signed by them and to talk to them. It was a pleasure. Yeah. I will definitely recommend Villoro. Actually, he's over there. He's one of the most influential and prolific authors nowadays in Mexico. So it is worth knowing him. But I like the fact that it is a very compact festival where you can have a view of many things, and that the variety is very open. So I like the fact that you can come here and have a look to different things in the same day. The translation is an opportunity to expand the narrative of different cultures and different contexts. So I think it is fundamental to increase translations translations to English from other cultures and contexts.
Well, the main thing was that I'd heard about Sergio Rodríguez's writing, in particular The Femicide Machine, which is one of the few of his essays which is translated into English, which is a horrific story about not only over 400 women and girls who went missing in the Ciudad Juárez near the American-Mexican border, but also the fact that to date the authorities have not brought anyone to book for that, and how many journalists are in prison in Mexico, higher than anywhere else apart from Iraq, and how little is done, how lawless and what's the word? It goes beyond lawless, because it's so immoral that with so much violence in that society, so little is done to do anything to rectify that situation. So I knew a bit about this, but not as much as I discovered further, and hearing Juan Villoro talk about things as well. I hadn't realised just the extent of it, but also the kind of joyfulness and the creativity that is simultaneously there in Mexico. So in my mind, I suppose I thought of it as a more violent, lawless society and forgot about all the rest of the colour and the creativity and the energy that there is there. I think one of the things was touched on in the discussion by Juan, where he said that there's this incredibly important border between Mexico and America, and we hear about, for instance, the narratives of the drug lords and the drug cartels and the criminality in Mexico, but that only exists because of the fact that in America is the largest consumer of drugs in the whole world, and that border is so porous, but we never hear about the other side of the coin, about the criminality on the American side of the border that means that the Mexican criminality and drug cartels can exist and flourish. So that, I think, makes it very important that we read more about what is going on in Mexican society, because the other side of that, the corollary of that, is that this is supported, in effect, by what's going on in America. So that was fascinating to me, and I think it is important that people realise that, and particularly in the United States. You can discover so much here if you're a bit more, you don't just go for the people you've heard of or the big name authors, but you look at the topics, and particularly where the discussion like today, because you're almost certainly going to be introduced to something that you didn't know about, something that you'll find inspiring, want to read more about. And we've been to talks at Word Power, the wonderful radical bookshop in Edinburgh, fantastic, free, every lunchtime, 1 o'clock. You go there and almost certainly whatever you hear about, you buy the book, you talk to the author, and it's that interaction also that you get with the authors afterwards, which I think is so special.